Hey everybody, how are we doing? It's good to be here, which is really lucky that I am here because our internet has been out. Actually, it's still out of my house. That's why I got the virtual background going on here because the internet's still out of my house. So I actually was able to come over to the office and hopefully our internet here will be stable enough. But it's really maybe a great mercy to be able to be here with you all today. So love to see how everybody's doing. Just wait for a second for people to start popping in. I'm being a normie today, drinking coffee. Normally I've got like a little bit of an energy drink going on this show, but today is coffee because it's kind of like it's a coffee day. It's really gross outside, kind of icky, and it's not even cold. It's just like foggy and muggy and nasty. But while I'm waiting for people, I want to do one of my favorite things as a priest, and that is the switching over of the breviary. So the Liturgy of the Hours today will end for ordinary time, actually this afternoon, and this evening it will become Advent. So I'm switching out my ordinary time book here. By the way, I don't fully get why the American one did this, where we've got like two ordinary time breviaries and then one for Advent and Christmas and a second one for Lent and Easter. It's a little bit confusing, but you just got to know that in the United States, you get rid of this green book and we go over to the blue one. Now I need some new ribbons and stuff. So what I actually do is I just like pull the ribbons out of the same book and like switch them around. But you know, whatever, it all works. So I got the blue book here, book 1 for Advent and Christmas. Oh, it actually has ribbons in it. I don't need these, put them back. All right, so a lot of priests have this. If you ever wondered what it is, this is the leather cover to our prayer book, the Liturgy of the Hours. It's not just ours, but we have to do it and you're encouraged to do it. So, you know, make of that what you will. But a lot of guys have like a leather cover for it so that the book doesn't get beat up and tossed around. And that's just because like we take it everywhere. So it's just kind of for convenience. Anyway, so the book goes inside as you would imagine it would. Mine is so old that the zipper doesn't even work anymore. It's just more like a liquid protector. On the back of mine here, on the back of mine here, got an image of the Immaculate Conception, right? So miraculous medal here. Somebody got me that while they were at the National Shrine in DC, and I thought that was really cool. So I kind of keep it on my book as a way to pray for parishioners and just people who are nice to me. So that's there. Okay, now we got the book. Now we get to do the fun part and put the ribbons together. So Advent has all kinds of silliness to it. Good silliness, but still silliness. So first ribbon. Pull them all out. Pull them all out. All of them out. Okay. So the first one is going to go towards the front of the book here. And this is what we call the seasonal. So this is the part that handles like the days with their own stuff, right? So like think of a day that has like a lot of its own stuff, like Easter, Christmas, those kind of things, right? But in Advent, actually every day has its own text. So what we're going to do, we're going to put the first ribbon here where it says the first Sunday of Advent. There we go. First Sunday of Advent. We'll put that right there. Right. So then the next one, I'm going to find it real quick. The next ribbon is going to go at the rules. The rules, where are you? Here they are. So I keep a ribbon here. You don't have to. This is the beginning of the rules. It's called the invitatory. The big giveaway that this is the rules is that everything is in red. And so if you ever hear a priest say that you say the black and do the red, that's what this means. The red are the rules. They tell you what to do. So I keep a ribbon here just in case, because Advent, Lent, Easter, Christmas, all those are weird and the rules change. So I keep one right there just to be safe. Okay, next ribbon is going to go at the beginning of the Psalms, the beginning of the 4-week Psalter. So Saturday evening, which is Sunday evening prayer 1. It's a horrible way to say that. First Vespers is way cooler, more traditional, but that's going to go right there that one. Okay, so we've got 2 ribbons left. What do we do with them? Okay, ribbon number 1 is going to go at night prayer, wherever that is. Where are you? Soon. Come on. There we go. Okay, night prayer. So, beginning of night prayer for Saturday night. I'll be honest, a lot of priests have these memorized. So, you don't really need a ribbon here. It's just when you're tired and you can't quite remember which of the little readings it is for the day, keep a ribbon right there. Okay, last one is going to go towards the back of the book with the saints. So the saints' feast days, holy days, all that kind of stuff. So since today is the 2nd, let's find the next one. Okay, the next one is going to be December 3rd, but we'll skip that. So we'll just turn the page and flip it to number 4, which is going to be for St. John Damascene. It'll be on Monday. So got all the little ribbons in the book, and now we are ready to go. So there you go. You just saw one of my favorite times of the year as a priest. It happens 6 times a year. 6 times a year we switch out the books. So I don't know. I like it. It's kind of neat. Anyway, let's go down and say hi to everybody. First is Terry. Hi, Terry. It's good to see you. Like I said, I'm grateful that I'm able to be here because the internet is out at my house. So I'm over in the office with the virtual background because there's a giant whiteboard behind me and it works. So anyway, it's good to see you. S388T. Hi there. Hello. It's good to see you. We've got Sarah. Hello, Father Robert and fellow Adventeers. Yeah, it is almost Advent. I personally am really having a hard time with how fast this year went by. And I know people say that, and it's kind of like the cute thing people say, but I was like actually surprised. So surprised that I don't remember if I bought Advent candles. And if I did buy Advent candles, I don't know if I remember where I put them. So that just to give you a concept of like how not ready I am. So there you go. I am very much getting over that it is Advent now. Okay, from Andrew. Hello. It's good to see you. And here we go. This is from Sarah. This is like getting inside baseball. Yeah, it is like getting inside baseball, but I don't know. I try to find this middle because I know some priests who want to share everything because they think it's cool and helps. And I don't. Like when people are like, how does a priest go out to eat? Like, no, I don't care, man. That's not, no, right? I don't want to know what you do every day forever. Just not because I hate you. It's just nobody is really that interesting. But I think that there's something people miss about our life professionally and publicly. And that is the fact that our prayer books change and that the seasons change. Today, even at church, setting out the purple banners and the changing the lectionary for the weekdays, like that's just something that has to happen. And you don't think about it too much, but it's a shift. It's like we're getting things are different now. So, and also this is year B, and year B is okay to preach. It's okay. My big hang up with year B is it tends to get a little thematic in terms of the Sunday reading. So A, they did really, really well. A was supposed to be this great theological enterprise with like what Vatican II taught about how the Old Testament shows up in the New and that the New is foreshadowed in the Old. So for year A, all of the first readings in the Gospels are like a beautiful match. There's all kinds of theology and symbolism. It's great. For year B, they went more with the themes. So for example, this is glaring, but in the middle of the summer in year B, we will have 7 Sundays of John 6. 7 Sundays about the Eucharist. Now, it's not to say that's not important. Obviously, the Eucharist is a big deal, but I mean, 7. It's so many. So many. But I don't really enjoy that part of it. And then year C, like they say like A, B, and C is Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And it is, but C's challenging in terms of the way they did the whole arrangement, because C is a lot of moral preaching. It's not just social justice. It's a lot of moralizing. And morals are important. It's a fourth of the catechism, but I think you can only talk about like the need to give alms and help the poor and the need to love God first. You can only talk about that so much. And sometimes you just want to tell people like, Jesus was pretty clear, do that. Like, well, I can't do it literally. Okay, well, do something. But you got to sit here and expound and be like, as we know from the gospel, the poverty of the poor is bad. You're like, yeah, I know, man. So it's not my favorite one, but B's what it is. So let's have fun with it. All right, a couple more greetings, and then we can get into some of these questions from Rhonda. Hi, Rhonda. It's good to see you. And then from Sheila, also good to see you. Hope you're doing okay. So let's go ahead and get started with a few questions that people have. Let me turn off my music here. I like my music, but goodbye. All right, so let's get with our first question here. This is from Giselle. So Giselle says, what are ways to battle spiritual warfare other than prayer? Do priests do purification rituals to cleanse and protect themselves against evil other than prayer? All right, so let's try to break this down. Okay. Are there other ways? Are there other things that happen besides prayer? Yes, there are other things that happen besides prayer. But they are not, those other things don't do the work. So think about it like when you watch, right next to me, they're building a giant restaurant. It's like I'm watching them put it up. So they have to get the nails in the wood, right? They've got to hammer some nails in, or else the structure is not going to go up. But that's not all they do. Right? There's a lot of tools that measure. There's a lot of lines that are drawn. There's a lot of digging around and all that kind of thing. And there's hammers. But hammers are the things that actually get the building up. So when we say that there are lots of things involved in spiritual warfare, yes, but prayer is the thing that works. Prayer is the thing that gets it done. So when people say, oh, I need something other than prayer, I always want to try to clarify this a little bit. So one of the things that can make your prayer more powerful, not like magic, but it I don't know how to say it. It sort of cleanses your heart so that it's not the prayer that's better, it's you that's better. So I tell people a lot, if you really want to pray for something, do a little fasting. Do a little fasting as well. So Jesus actually says this in the New Testament. When the apostles can't drive out a demon, he says that this kind only comes out with much prayer and fasting. So prayer and fasting are really supposed to be two sides of the same coin. And if we try to do one without the other, our one of them is going to suffer. So if you try to fast without praying, it's not a spiritual thing. And if you try to pray without fasting, it's not a real thing. So if you want your prayer to maybe cost you something, add a little fasting to it as well. In terms of what priests do, it's just that. It's not magic. There's no secret sauce. There's nothing like that. It's prayer, fasting, repenting of sins, going to confession, all that kind of thing. Using the prayers and stuff of the church in a way that helps you. And I say the way that helps you because there's a theological thing that's going on behind the scenes. And that's what's called ex opere operantis, which means by virtue of the work of the worker. So that's a lot of words, right? Compare it to the sacraments. So the sacraments are said to work ex opere operato, which means by virtue of the fact that they're done. The sacraments work because they work. It doesn't matter what you believe about them. It doesn't matter your worthiness or unworthiness. The sacraments work because they work. Now, that's not true for what we're talking about. What we're talking about here are what's called sacramentals. So they're things instituted by the church that when we use them appropriately, develop the life of grace in us. So take holy water, medals, images, statues, candles, all that kind of thing, incense, all these are sacramentals. So what does that mean? If they work by virtue of the worker, that means that you should use the things that help you feel close to God. So if, for example, the use of Latin makes a priest feel more devout in his prayers, if I don't know, holy water or a rosary or candles, if those things help a person pray, they are good in this context. And what helps one person may not help another. So I think we got to be really careful not to talk about secret sauce, not to talk about some kind of like magic formula that we found. Everything that we say in this type of arena has to be grounded in like, this helps me. This helps me do this thing. So that's my take on it. Pray and fast and use the things of the church in a way that works for you, in a way that helps you. We don't want to go into superstition. We don't want to go into making these things the goal themselves. But insofar as they help us pray and they kind of focus our prayer and our intention, then yeah, they're very, very good things. This is from Susan Reynolds. Does a Christian go to heaven immediately after death? So this is actually a really hard question. And it's hard because I don't know. I've never been to heaven. I've never died. So I don't know. So the church does teach that there is purgatory, right? That there is this spot for people who are not quite ready to go to heaven, but are not bad enough to go to hell, if that makes sense. So the way I think about this is actually based on C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was not a Catholic, by the way, so he was a Protestant, and he believed this, and I think he was remarkably right, like remarkably right. So right that I went to the spot where he wrote this so I could see it, right? So Lewis points out that all that purgatory teaches is not a third place. So purgatory is not like the middle option for your average people. Purgatory is the waiting room for heaven. So there really is only heaven and hell. So if a person makes it to purgatory, they've been saved. So all of these sermons and things about like, oh, the soul's roasting alive and being tormented, and they made it to heaven. They made it to heaven. They are saved. But for us as Catholics, heaven is a real thing. So when I say that someone gets saved and they're in the presence of God, it means that they are divinized. They are full of the divine life. So we don't think that like God looks at you and you're still covered in sins and passions and all kinds of ick. And God's like, come on, I'm nice. Don't worry about it. It's not that God isn't nice. It's that God is real. And God wants us to come into his presence in a way that's, let's say it, real. So God wants us to be actually divinized, actually full of life, actually without our sins and passions and baggage. And so purgatory is a way that we get ourselves cleaned up to be fully in the presence of God. So the question is, does a Christian immediately go to heaven? I mean, I don't really know how it works, but I know, number one, that God is merciful, but I also know that God is just, and I also know that God is true. So I think sometimes we're too quick to throw everyone into heaven, but there are also people who are too quick to act like they know it all. So I'm not going to claim that I know it all. I know that not everybody's perfect when they die, and that God wants to help with that. So that's kind of that's my best shot at answering that. Hope it helps. All right. So we got here, this is from Sarah. The 7 great I am statements. I wish, Sarah, I wish. John's gospel does have a lot of I am statements. I don't know if it's 7. I know there's 7 signs in John's gospel, but it's actually, I think it's literally just like 7 weeks of John 6. They just break it up into chunks. And don't get me wrong, John 6 is amazing. It's a great, great piece of the gospel. It's the word of God. What's not to like? It's just a lot. It's a lot. And it's a lot of one thing. It's like, I like French fries, but I don't want to eat a whole dump truck full of French fries. It's like, I'm good. I'm full. I've got what I needed out of these French fries. That's kind of how I think about it. It's from Catherine. Hello, Father. Hello. It's good to see you. Giselle's got a follow-up. What's the instructions for fasting? This is different for everybody. So it depends. Think about it like when you go to the gym. So I learned how to lift weights. And at first I was like, well, how do I know how much weight to use for an exercise? And they said, okay, find one and find one that's heavy enough to where you can do 10, 10 reps of that exercise, but heavy enough to by the 10th one, you're tired. You can't do more. So the way I look at fasting is try stuff. So if fasting for you is going to mean like, okay, I'm going to give up dessert a couple times a week. If that's hard, okay, you've reached your baseline. That's good. Maybe you need to say, okay, well, I'm going to give up all meat on Fridays and Wednesdays. Okay, if that's easy, well, then you can try more. So what I'm trying to say is you need to find something that pulls a little bit, but not so much that you're going to fall over. So the goal is not to destroy yourself. The goal isn't to absolutely, get wrecked. The goal is to challenge yourself and to push a little bit beyond what's comfortable. So you'll find just on what works for you, whether that's giving up soda, whether it's giving up alcohol, whether it's giving up TV, or there's lots of different ways of fasting. You need to find one that works for you and addresses what you think you need to address. So be patient with yourself and find what works for you and be willing to adjust it either up or down depending on your needs. This is from Sarah. I recently found out St. Lucy is a patron saint of wreaths. Is St. Lucy one of the saints of light during the month of December? She is actually. I believe her feast day is on the 13th of December. There's a reason for that. And I don't think it's because she was martyred on that day. I don't think so. I'm trying to see if I have like a book about her. I don't know. I can't read from this far away. Okay, so here's what I know. I know that December 13th is one of the darkest days of the calendar year. I'm pretty sure. Back in the day, St. Lucy's feast day was the, what do you call it? St. Lucy's feast day was the beginning of the Ember Fast, the Ember Days. So these special days of prayer and fasting that happened during every season. So St. Lucy, it's definitely a dark day. She supposedly was blinded, and that's how she was, that was part of her martyrdom. But yeah, I don't really know a whole lot other than that. I know, like I said, I know it's a very dark day. As we get closer and closer to the winter solstice on December 21st, which, by the way, is not the same thing as Christmas. Everybody knew when the winter solstice was. So all these people who are like, oh, Christianity came up with Christmas as a way to sanctify the winter solstice. No, they knew when the winter solstice was. That's not dumb. I mean, we still, even in our martyrology, like the phases of the moon are still like a big part of that. The whole build up to this Christmas season is actually how dark it gets outside, the darkness that we find ourselves physically in. So yeah, just a cool little thought there. It's once again from Giselle. Do you wear or carry anything to protect yourself as a priest? No, and I caution against that kind of thinking. It's not the thing itself that protects you. That would be superstition. At least I think it would be. It's always God that protects us, and it's God's grace. Things are always meant to be physical reminders of that. The thing itself doesn't protect, and if we focus more on the thing and not on who the thing points to, we're going to be a little bit in trouble. So that's I don't know, just a caution. I would really be careful about any priest who tells you, oh, this magic scapular or this metal or no, that's not Christianity. That's just not how it works. So from Terry, who hears the Pope's confession? I actually don't know. I believe the Holy Father goes to confession way more often than most priests do. So I've got to give him the benefit of the doubt that he gets to go pretty frequently. I don't know who hears his confession. I really don't know. And probably it's good that we don't know that. It's probably good. So one thing a lot of people have a hard time really getting is like, not only with the seal of confession are we not supposed to share that stuff, we're not really even supposed to say we heard somebody's confession. So I recall a time where there was a family and their kid was in the middle of like first communion prep, and the the, the church they were going to wanted a copy of a first confession certificate. And I had to call them and be like, you can't ask for that. I am in no way allowed to acknowledge that I have or have not heard somebody's confession. So you can't never, if a church tries to give you a first confession certificate, you need to let them know that that's probably a violation of the seal of confession. And if a church asks for that, you should tell them they're not allowed to ask for that. I don't know, just something to think about. This is from David. Yeah, David, I see this is you. I saw it right there. Hicks Law Firm. I put two and two together right here. Okay. What are my thoughts on the rad trad movement and figures like Taylor Marshall? Okay. Here's the thing with the rad trad movement. You got to know this. It stands for radical traditionalist. So there's good and there's bad. And I want to be very clear that these are not dumb people. These are not people who just haven't read enough or don't have a nuanced experience of faith. I don't think that. What I think is that there are some issues that they may not fully take into account. Okay, so let's be really clear. What I'm talking about. So sometimes these rad trads, they'll go back and they'll look at something like, let's say, Thomistic theology, the theology of St. Thomas, or traditional theology as it's understood by like the manual tradition, the summas, just things like that. And they'll say like, oh, well, so-and-so says this in the manual. And you're like, okay, that is a good testament to tradition, but those things are opinions. What we want to go off are what we know from the church and from the magisterium. So, for instance, I remember a lot of radical traditionalists when I was growing up were focused on the syllabus of errors from Pius IX. But I also want to point out that certain things on the syllabus of errors are things like democracy and streetlights. So, I think some of this Catholic tradition is rooted in a particular time and place. And I think that we have to be aware enough to recognize that the picture that they might be building in their head of the Latin Mass, of the way it used to be, of tradition, some of that is mixed with what we know today. So for instance, whenever I hear a priest say that, I was like, Father, do you know how your life would look? It would not be like, oh, well, we have a really neat breviary. It's in Latin and it's longer and it's traditional. You wouldn't be saying the hours at their appointed time, for example. You would say them all as soon as you could in the morning, or right? Like it was not you didn't really have time to savor this stuff. The economics of things were really challenging for priests. They weren't really paid anything, and your food, you weren't even given any food apart from what the pastor decided to give you. It was not perfect. It really was not perfect. Yes, the Latin Mass was pretty. It was beautiful. It really, like, the church taught the faith. There was a lot of good there, but it wasn't perfect, right? There was still some things missing, right? Like the fact that people they weren't able to even understand some of what was going on. So I just think I want to be really careful about what was real and what's kind of something that we've created in our head, right? About what we would like to see. And some of that really is kind of a reaction to what we saw in the 90s, the 2000s, and in today's church. We see people being irreverent at Mass. We see churches are ugly. We see priests not teaching the faith. We see the sacraments celebrated badly. And so we think, oh gosh, back in the day, it wasn't like that. And there's truth to that, but it wasn't as perfect as we might be building it up to be. My issue with some people, like with Taylor Marshall, I think some of the things he says are good, thought-provoking questions. But I also sometimes think there's a lack of charity. And charity isn't fake. Charity is not covering up things. But charity means I'm not going to assume that this person is a heretic just because I don't like what's going on. And it's not to say like we have to turn off our brains, but I just think they throw around certain words that are very, very consequential. They throw them around pretty hard. I used to be a lot harsher too before I was a priest. And it's like when you actually have to do this job and you're actually trying to keep all of the things in balance, you're trying to be as Christ-like as you can to people and bring them along, but also tell them the truth as much as they can bear. And I sometimes think these Taylor Marshall, maybe not him, but the people that that can get attached to that can, I don't know. I just think sometimes they can be a little harsh, and they've never had to actually do it. So I'm not calling them armchair quarterbacks. I'm just saying that an element of, like, when you're in the middle of it all, trying to judge and balance it. It's not as easy as denying everybody communion and cracking the whip all the time. That's all. That's all my thought. But I do think that these guys have some points that are worth considering, and it made me think today. I was listening to a YouTube video about Ruby Tuesday. I used to love going there when I was a kid. It's like this kind of casual, boring American dining place, but they had all this like kitschy, like Tiffany glassware and like memorabilia everywhere. And so what happened was, in the late 2000s, they decided that that stuff was kitsch, it was dumb, it was tacky. So they just took it down and they tried to make themselves look like clean and chic and modern, but it actually had the opposite effect because they ruined the soul of the restaurant. And a lot of people said, I really don't want to go here anymore. Or I also think of like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola changed the recipe. I think it was in the 80s. They had New Coke, and New Coke was a disaster. It was horrible. I was not alive to experience it, but everybody who I've talked to said it was horrible. It was just disgusting. And Coca-Cola had to go back to their formula that worked because they were willing to face the facts. One criticism I think that the traditionalists make that is very valid is we changed our worship, we changed the way our buildings look, we changed the feel of being Catholic. Did it produce good results? I think that's something to think about. I think it's something to think about. Now we can't slide and just say, oh, well, if we had beautiful altars and vestments, everyone would be Catholic. No, but it would help. It would certainly not make things worse. So that's my thought. I think that there is a lot of good there, but I think there needs to be a little bit of caution, because sometimes they might make things a little bit stronger than they need to be, or they might be based on a memory more than an experience of magisterium, let's call it. All right, let's get to Nathan here. And then I'm actually going to have to end a little bit early today because I have to do some final little setup thingies for Advent. All right. So what about the promises of the scapular of the rosary? Are you claiming it's superstitious to believe in the promises these articles draw us closer to God? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But even those promises are based on the same criteria as, let's say, an indulgence, right? To do an indulgence without the right attitude, for instance, like not repenting of sins, not being willing to live our Catholic faith in a more dramatic way, without the right heart, without the right interior disposition, these promises, they don't work on their own, right? They work with us. And so where I'm coming from here is the theological distinction between a sacrament and a sacramental, right? That sacraments work because they work, whereas a sacramental works because of our good use thereof, right? Ex opere operantis, to use the Thomistic term. So what I'm saying with the rosary and the scapular is putting on, for instance, the scapular is meant to be a piece of a religious habit. It's a tiny little piece, but it's still supposed to be a piece. To wear the scapular without trying to live the thing that the scapular points to, I just have a hard time seeing that as living the promises, right? And in the same way, I think saying the rosary, but not trying to be a good Catholic, I don't want to say it's totally empty, because God can work with that, but I don't see that as the same thing as what Mary's talking about, if that makes sense. But I would also caution, these promises are good, but they're not meant to be articles of faith. And so I just say, yeah, they're good, and the church recognizes them, but I think we are allowed to we're allowed to speculate a little bit about how this works, because that's not something that it's not something that's part of the deposit of faith, strictly speaking. So I would just say caution, just caution. Yes, they absolutely work. Yes, those things are good, but they work when done rightly. Think about it like uh, there's a bit, I think it's in Acts 19 or 21. I don't have it off the top of my head, and I'm sorry. Acts 19 or 21 has some people trying to use the same prayers that St. Paul uses to cure the sick and drive out demons, right? So he invokes, I forget who it is, but it's a group of people. They invoke Paul and Jesus and lots of names. And it's really interesting how the demons respond to them doing this. The demons say, "This Jesus we know and this Paul we know, but who are you?" So there is something to be said about, it's not just that we do these kind of formulas and that we perform these actions. There does have to be a personal connection to them. Just using Paul's name and just using Jesus's name is not enough to drive out the demons when there's not a real connection between that person and Jesus. That's how I would think about it. The rosary works, but it works when there's a connection between myself and the Blessed Virgin Mary, right? And so I think that's probably a good way to think about those promises. That's all. But anyway, I'm going to probably have to end it here today. Got to go set up everything for Advent and make sure all our ducks are in a row. But I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much for your questions. We had some really, really good ones today. I should be back next week if all things work. Pray that my internet gets fixed, because I would like to have internet back. It's nice. It's nice to have it, but maybe it's a time to be quiet and be with God. So who knows? But anyway, thank you all so much for your time and your attention. This has been fun. Take care, and I hope I can see you next week.